Afraid of nobody indeed. I'm Matt Edwards. You are in the jungle. Thank you so much for tuning in. It is September 1st. That means football is upon us. 1 week from today, the Buffalo Bills will travel to LA to take on the Rams, a game that I think, if not for a phantom holding penalty on Logan Wilson, is happening in Cincinnati. But we're not going to talk about that. We're moving forward because the future is bright for the Cincinnati Bengals. What we'll talk about today is we're going to get into that guard situation. I'll give you 5 things I loved about this offseason. Russell Wilson signed a big old contract this morning. That will have implications for what Mr. Burrow gets next year. We're going to get into all that. We'll do that today, and then a week from today, on Thursday, before that opener, I will give you, as I do every year, I will give you my predictions for all 32 teams, including the Cincinnati Bengals, as well as my Super Bowl winner prediction. I got it right last year. I picked the Rams to win in the preseason last year. So 3 or 4 years doing this podcast, I finally got it right. And boy, was I never so upset to be right. But what are you going to do? That's life. Let's start with this roster and the roster cuts. Look, no massive surprises when it comes to this roster. The punter battle was big, right? Kevin Huber wins it over Drew Chrisman. That was fun. Cordell Volson will be the starting left guard. That was all but a given going into preseason game number 3, but something that's really fun, right? You got a guy on day 3 that you're excited to have starting in a position where you've really needed a starter, and you got a rookie who seems to fit the mold so far. We'll see how he does when he's playing real NFL talent for 4 quarters, but right now, all is well on the Cordell Volson front. And look, if O.J. Howard ends up signing with the Bengals, maybe that becomes the second biggest story of all this roster shuffling after the punter battle. Howard has never lived up to that hype of being a first-round pick, but on this Bengals roster, if he sees the field, he's probably Joe Burrow's 4th, 5th, 6th option, and he's not a bad 4th, 5th, or 6th option. But let's think about these major headlines I just went over from the 53-man roster. Number 1, punter battle. Number 2, left guard battle. Backup tight end. Maybe he's number 3 tight end to Drew Sample. Either way, not the starting tight end is a big talker. Another big talker, wide receiver 6. All those headlines I just mentioned, it's about as minor as it gets in the NFL, right? Look around the AFC North. The Steelers don't know who their quarterback will be in week 1. Or at least neither of them really top the other one enough for them to let us know. The Browns have 2 backup quarterbacks that are going to play for the first 11 games of the season. Jacoby Brissett's a nice backup quarterback, but in this division, in this conference, you're not really feeling great about your odds at getting to the playoffs with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback for the majority of the season. And let's throw Baltimore in there. Their quarterback is talking to fans on Twitter about his contract. Bengals fans, let's stop and smell the roses for a second. Coming off a Super Bowl appearance with 4 new starters on the offensive line, all upgrades. They got better at tight end with Hayden Hurst. Their pass rush rotation is absurd. Throwing Joseph Osai back in the mix should be fun. And we'll get into it, but maybe they found Ed Reed light in Dax Hill. That's a pretty good offseason. We are in the early stages of the golden era of Cincinnati Bengals football. I truly believe that, so let's enjoy it. We can talk about the punter battle. We can talk about wide receiver 6, but let's not get too worked up. Let's not overlook the fact that we're heading into what should be the greatest decade, maybe 15 years of football in the history of the Cincinnati Bengals. But we can still complain about a few things, right? I don't even want to call it complaining. That's not the right word. We can still dissect things because it's fair to look at that preseason and say, wow, Kendrick Pryor, he would be nice to have on this team. The Bengals had the luxury of not wanting to cut wide receivers. There's other teams out there that's like, man, do we have a guy that we like as wide receiver 3? Bengals fans were worried about wide receivers 5 and 6. A lot of teams don't have a 2. Pretty good. It's pretty good. We've got the luxury of, do we keep Kendrick Pryor or Kwame Lassiter? While your all-world wide receivers go out there and torch secondaries every week, who is the guy that we are not sure if we want on the bench or on the active game day roster, whatever it is? Lassiter looked really good. He will be at the practice squad. And then meanwhile, Kendrick Pryor gets scooped up. The undrafted rookie out of Wisconsin ends up in Jacksonville, where Press Taylor, Zach Taylor's brother, is the offensive coordinator. Things are good on the offensive line. It looks like the Bengals, as I mentioned, found an absolute steal in the 4th round where they needed it most on the offensive line. You kind of looked at, is it going to be Jackson Carman or is it going to be Volson? And Volson, I mean, it wasn't a battle. After the second preseason game, we got to see Cordell Volson in action. I mean, just for starters, he tries, which is a nice quality to have in an NFL player. So that was good. And again, is it ideal to have a rookie ever starting on your offensive line? Probably not. But at the same time, if that's kind of the biggest concern, is a rookie who looked really good in the preseason starting at left guard. We're not sitting here talking about, damn it, Bobby Hart's going to be our right tackle again. We're not talking about what's Cordy Glenn going to do this year at tackle. We're talking about the left guard position. Life's pretty good. The other backup battle, we talk about the quarterback position. And look, God forbid they need the backup quarterback, right? But man, I can't, and I won't spend much time on this, but I can't sit here and not mention the fact that, I don't know why my alarm's going off, sorry about that. I cannot sit here and not mention the fact I thought Jake Browning looked a lot better than Brandon Allen in the preseason. And I think I'm a little higher on Brandon Allen than most. Now, that said, the backup quarterback, all about getting the guy who knows the playbook better, has more experience, because if the backup quarterback is needed to play more than a few games, you're screwed no matter what. No one wants Brandon Allen or Jake Browning, or no one expects them, I should say, to lead the Bengals back to the Super Bowl. But if, God forbid, anything happened to Joe Burrow where he's got to miss 2 or 3 games, you just want the guy who keeps you in games, and Bengals coaches clearly think that's Brandon Allen. I think I probably agree with him as much as I love that competitive fire we saw out of Jake Browning. I mean, he led the Bengals on a touchdown drive at the 2-minute warning against the Rams. I called a touchdown drive. Thad Moss, for all his flaws in the preseason, that was not offensive pass interference, but it's the preseason for the refs too. So that's where we're at on that. It's just one of those things where you saw that feistiness out of Jake Browning, but he'll still be around. He's on the practice squad. And again, here we are talking about the backup quarterback job, something that if any team has to deal with, they're in trouble. But that's where we're at as people who watch and follow this team. That's how good we have it right now. That's a storyline. The one I do want to dive into a little bit here is that guard situation. Barring injury, the guard position is the only real question mark on this offensive line. Jonah Williams is back. We all love that. And then Ted Karras and La'el Collins come in along with Alex Kappa at the other guard spot. Massive upgrades. Again, another thing to love about this team, and the idea that it sees what we all see, and that's that the time is now to get a Lombardi into Paycor Stadium. By the way, Paycor Stadium, got used to it a lot quicker than I thought I would. It's been Paul Brown forever, but Paycor Stadium definitely rolls off the tongue. Anyways, Cordell Volson seemed to exceed all expectations early on. How about if you're watching the broadcast, man, and this is before Cordell even takes a preseason snap, you've got Anthony Munoz, the greatest left tackle, probably the greatest offensive lineman in the history of the sport, just hyping this guy up. I'm sitting there thinking, what's the ceiling for this dude? If Anthony Munoz, I mean, it's one thing for dorks like me on Twitter to see a couple clips in practice and get excited. It's a whole nother ballgame when the GOAT is sitting there saying how much he likes Cordell Volson. So, no expectations there for the 4th-round rookie. Anthony Munoz loved Cordell Volson. By the way, Cordell is the first AFC North player named Cordell since Cordell Stewart. Forgot about him, the old Steelers quarterback / Anyways, the most important thing is this is a reason to keep Jackson Carman on the bench. He's certainly not ready. Whether or not he'll be ready is a whole nother conversation. But you just think, especially when you get to day 3 in the draft, how the chips can fall can really be out of your control. So the Bengals able to get Cordell Volson gives him the opportunity to come in there. Prior to training camp getting underway, it was kind of, all right, well, Jackson Carman's going to be in there. We'll see how it goes. And then Volson comes in, and in practice, from what everyone was saying, I was not there, but from what everyone was saying, what we could see, Volson clearly the better guy, and we saw it on the field. And Carman, I mean, he was a number 46 overall pick. Number 46 overall in 2021. If he was picked 246 instead, I'm not sure he makes his final roster. I really don't think that he does. He was just bad in the preseason. That last preseason game, there was a sack that he gave up where he did not move his feet. He stood straight up as if he thought the defensive lineman was just going to go, okay, well, let me try to get by you, and then I'll get the sack. He's going to run around you. Move your feet, man. Anyways, I'm not going to, again, it's good times. I'm not going to sit here and harp too much on the backup left guard, who we're not even sure is going to be active on game days. The Bengals also brought in Max Sharping at guard. I don't know much about him. What we can tell you is he started 33 NFL games, so you've got some more experience. He's a former second-round pick of the Titans. And look, offensive linemen are so scarce around the league right now. If you're getting let go like Sharping did, then it's probably not a guy you want out there on the field. But again, the Bengals just have to get the best guys they can, and they clearly thought he was someone who they could bring in and maybe upgrade that second-string offensive line. So it's never bad to have more offensive linemen than you need because, as we know, history tells us you're going to have some bumps and bruises up there. And, I've mentioned it before. I'll always wonder, it's something that really doesn't get talked about, but Riley Reif last year and that foot injury, if he's playing in that game on February 13th, are the Bengals playing on Thursday night to open the season? I'm going to try not to harp on this stuff too long or too much during the season because I know we're moving forward, but I still think about every day things that could have been different, and that's one that I don't really think gets talked about. But injuries are part of the game, and the Bengals overall were very fortunate not to have very many last year, and they'll need to do the same again this year if they want to make another run to the Super Bowl 57 in Phoenix. Okay. So I sat there and started the show telling you how trivial all the Bengals' problems are and then talked about them for what? It's been 15 minutes now? 12? Okay. Yeah, so the flip side of that, though, is this is what we have to talk about because everything else is so good. I mean, I don't need to tell anyone listening to this podcast, the Bengals probably have the most talented group of playmakers in the NFL. That defensive line, holy cow, the defensive line, you look at the starters and then you look at the pass rushers, they're going to be able to rotate in there to keep their legs fresh. My God, am I excited to see what those guys can do up front. And, come on. You just look, Cam Sample, Jeffrey Gunter, the rookie out of Coastal Carolina, had an awesome preseason. He makes the roster. We all like Cam Sample a little last year. We loved Joseph Osai last year. He was a guy the Bengals felt like they got in the third round to steal. I think it was his first play ever on an NFL field in the preseason last year. He sacked Tom Brady. So, again, it's nice to have those guys to come in there. The pass rush should be absurd, and you certainly need that in the AFC. It's a great thing, man. Chidobe Awuzie, another home run signing last year. We all know how good Jermaine Pratt and Logan Wilson have been at the linebacker position, and then safety got even better with the draft. We'll get into that in a little bit. I'm just kind of rambling about how good the Bengals are right now because I got to keep it positive too because there's nothing but positives in Bengaldom at the moment. As I told you at the top of the show, I'm going to get into the 5 things I loved about this offseason. You know what I didn't talk about is that quarterback Russell Wilson, the new quarterback contract that kind of changed everything. So let's get into that real quick before we do that. Russell Wilson today signs a contract. Let me make sure I get the numbers right here. He has not taken a snap for the Broncos yet, but he is the highest paid player in the history of the Denver Broncos. I know he got $245. So according to Adam Schefter, who usually gets things right, the Broncos and Russell Wilson just reached an agreement on a 5-year, $245 million contract. That includes $165 guaranteed. So, big number, sure. Why do you care? Because next year, Joseph Lee Burrow is going to get paid, and he's, 26? So, Russell Wilson's 33. And this is why Paycor Stadium is now the home of the Cincinnati Bengals and not Paul Brown Stadium, because Joe Burrow next summer is going to become either the first or second highest paid quarterback, in my opinion. I guess, things could change, but I think it would be crazy when you look at this list. Field Yates put this out there on Twitter. The top 5 highest paid quarterbacks in terms of average annual value as of today, September 1st. Number 1, you've got Aaron Rodgers at just over $50 million. Number 2 is now Russell Wilson at $49 million. Number 3, Kyler Murray at $46 million. Boy, does he have some expectations to live up to. Deshaun Watson after that in Cleveland at $46 million. And then going into the bargain bin, Patrick Mahomes at $45 million. What I'm saying here is there's no way that you can Joe Burrow is going to laugh his way out of Paycor Stadium if you try to offer him less than what Kyler Murray or Deshaun Watson make. So shout out to the Cardinals and Browns for giving bad contracts out to quarterbacks. But it is what it is, man. You want to be a team that has the opportunity to make someone the highest paid quarterback in the league, because that means you got a keeper. And the Bengals certainly have that with Burrow. So again, this kind of goes back to the good position they're in right now. You got a guy who you feel comfortable, right? It's one thing. There are Cardinals fans out there. There are Browns fans out there right now. And maybe even some Broncos fans with Russell Wilson being 33. Although Russell Wilson certainly is at a higher tier than either Murray or Watson. But when the Bengals pay Joe Burrow what they're going to pay Joe Burrow, there's not going to be any Bengals fans saying, ooh, I'm not sure. When Andy Dalton got that big deal, there were some people say, not sure. This isn't going to be one of those situations. So it's interesting, man. Joe Burrow, I said on Twitter this morning, literally 4 years ago, wanted to go play quarterback at Nebraska, those onside kickers out in Cornhusker country, and they were like, we don't really see you as a quarterback. 5 years later, I guess is what it'll be, he's going to be paid $50 million a year to play quarterback at the highest level in the entire universe. So there's that. Always interesting at this point. Receiver contracts, quarterback contracts, because the Bengals have some big ones to hand out here over the next year. Let's talk about 5 things I loved this offseason as promised. Number 1, I know I'm in the minority on this. Speaking of the Broncos, I love all the love that has been given to the Bills, the Broncos, the Chargers, these new Cinderellas of the AFC. I guess the Bills aren't new, but the other two. I mean, the Bengals go out. If you hadn't heard, the Cincinnati Bengals were champions of the AFC last year. They won 3 playoff games, and therefore they were the best team in the AFC. They were the AFC champions. A few weeks after, let's call it a few months even, maybe 6 weeks later, the Buffalo Bills are the overwhelming favorite to win the AFC. Russell Wilson in Denver, the Broncos are an automatic Super Bowl favorite. Justin Herbert, the same Justin Herbert who couldn't beat the Raiders in Week 18 to go to the playoffs, suddenly he's the future of this league. It's not Joe Burrow, who had an offensive line that a few of them, the Bengals starting right tackle in the Super Bowl also played the entire the entire first half of the second preseason game. So that's where they're at. I actually feel bad for Justin Herbert at this point. It's Canton or bust for Justin Herbert. But the reason I love this is because keep that chip on their shoulder. A lot of fans will get upset at power rankings if they don't feel like their team is where it should be. I'm the exact opposite. I want the Bengals to be told, hey, you guys got lucky. Do I agree with it? Hell no. Do I love that they're being told that? Absolutely. And you should too. It's not just football. It's not just sports. It's life. These are competitive guys. We know how competitive Joe Burrow is. We know how competitive you have to be to get to this level. It fires them up to be told, you're good, but even though you won it just 6 months ago, or I guess almost 8 months ago, whatever, some people are a lot better. You're like 5th or 6th on the list, even though most recently the evidence we have does not support that. I love that. Keep it coming. Bengals beat the Chiefs twice in January. They beat the number 1 seed on the road. And by the way, at the Super Bowl, which crowns the best team in all of football, they had the lead at the 2-minute warning. So there's that. I think maybe they should be in the mix a little bit more than they are. But I love the fact that they're not. So maybe I should shut up about it. Maybe I should be sitting here saying, yeah, maybe the Bengals will be 3rd place in the AFC North this year. I love it. Keep that chip on their shoulder. Number 2, look, I don't want to rip on Lamar Jackson too much. I think if you listen to me, I think he's overrated. Of course, there's a lot of people who go too far with it. I think he's a top 20 quarterback, not a top 10 quarterback. Obviously, best running quarterback in the league. And in my opinion, as far as I can remember, he's the best I've ever seen. But as all of this is, kind of unfolding and the quarterback landscape in the AFC North is completely turning over. I mean, Lamar, who's still on his rookie contract, is the elder statesman quarterback in the AFC North right now. And for as good as he's been, he's got an MVP. He's been very good. But you got to be the CEO. And he's tweeting about the trades his team made during the draft. He's tweeting, telling fans they're wrong about his contract status. Cool. Give this guy $250,000 or $250 million. He's already making $250,000, Baltimore. Please, give him all that money. Give him Russell Wilson money. If he's this grouchy when he's good now, how's it going to go the closer he gets to 30 years old and the legs don't work like they did at 24? Like I said, Lamar is the best running quarterback I've ever seen. He's got an NFL arm, but it's top 20, not top 10. And if you're a Bengals fan, or for that matter, a Browns, Steelers, a fan of really any team in the AFC, you have to sit here and say, you know what? Maybe keep kind of doing the things that don't make Lamar. Maybe Lamar should keep doing these things that can kind of make Baltimore sit back and take a second look. I think it's a win-win at this point. Because, Lamar Jackson, awesome quarterback. Of course, he's a starter in the NFL. But, I mean, we saw last year. Is anybody sitting here saying, well, that's a guy we when we see on the schedule, if you're the Bengals, you're really afraid of? So one of two things happens. Either A, Baltimore says, maybe he's not the guy, and they reset. Or B, they do say he's the guy, and I don't have any fear of Lamar anymore because he's, his legs are going to stop. Maybe he's got 2 or 3 more years. We've just never seen anyone, again, best running quarterback I've ever seen, arguably the best playmaker I've ever seen because he can do things that no one else could. When he's at his peak, he's as fun to watch as anyone. But that doesn't last forever, and maybe it will, but we have not seen it to this point. We have never seen a quarterback who does nothing but run the way he has sustain that for, more than a 5-year period. So while I do think that the Ravens are the biggest threat to the Bengals for, the next, at least this year, we'll see, the league changes so much year to year. I think if you're a Bengals fan, you're like, you're in good shape. Is this a team that can be a wild card team? Sure. But if the Bengals are healthy, they're not winning the division. It's as simple as that. Okay. Moving on. Number 3 thing that I really like this offseason. Great segment title, by the way, huh? Things I like this offseason. What a dork. Number 3, though, goes to the safety position on the Cincinnati Bengals. Let's get back into Bengaldom a little bit here. They held firm on Jesse Bates. If you follow me on Twitter, at Matt Edwards, you know how I feel about that. Jesse Bates is awesome. He deserves top 5 safety money. However, Bengals got a lot of guys to pay, and you can only pay so much. And I don't think that safety is a position that you spend big money on. Cornerback, sure. Pass rush, sure. Everything else takes care of itself. So what do the Bengals do? What's Duke Tobin do? They draft Dax Hill in the first round. If you follow me on Twitter, I wasn't crazy about the pick. If you listen to this podcast, you heard me call him Ed Reed Light at the top, or have the potential. Let's not crown him that. He certainly look, and again, it's not against the best guys in the league, right? But boy, did everyone get really excited. You couldn't have asked for much more out of Dax Hill in the preseason. And, of course, he didn't play that 3rd preseason game, so the Bengals coaches apparently felt the same. But what the Bengals did right there is they said, look, we've got an incredible pass rush. We've got one lockdown corner we really like in Chidobe Awuzie, and Eli Apple's not too bad either. Mike Hilton, arguably the best slot corner in the league. Let's let the rest of the guys be the veterans and do the things we know they're capable of doing. And from there, we don't need a top 5 paid safety. We've got this rookie who's really talented. So he can come in there. The other guys will force mistakes, and he's a ball hawk who can run around, who's athletic, and will make incredible plays. I mean, that one ball he almost intercepted. I forget if it was against the Giants or the Cardinals, but it looked like A.J. Green going up and climbing the ladder for a one-handed touchdown the way he went up there. I love what the Bengals did at safety. I hope Jesse Bates balls out. I hope he has 75 interceptions this year, and I hope next year he is the highest paid safety in the league for, I don't know, Tampa Bay or New Orleans or whatever, somewhere in the NFC. Meanwhile, the Bengals will probably have a similar amount of production. I don't even know if similarly is a word, but they will have a similar amount of production out of Dax Hill, who will cost a lot less. Of course, they can allocate that money to other places, such as Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, offensive lineman coming up, and I mentioned Chidobe Awuzie. They're going to have to re-sign him here at some point sooner than later as well. So the Bengals doing an excellent job of navigating that safety position in the offseason, one that got a lot of attention, and it looks like they figured out how to do it perfectly. Number 4, just the continued progressiveness of this franchise. We all know the critiques it suffered before Joe Burrow got here, but they named the stadium Paycor Stadium. They go with the white helmet, a simple layup in July to make the fans happy, to get the fans engaged, and we're seeing how much this is paying off. I mean, at that last preseason game, it was nearly sold out for a preseason game where we knew none of the starters were playing. The Bengals continue to trend in the right direction. So it's one thing for a team to get a quarterback like Joe Burrow and then be like, well, you got the main piece. That's really, if you've got a quarterback at Burrow's level, you've got a shot every year. They're not just doing that. They've got a shot every year, and they're doing the other things. They're seeing how green that grass can be when you do the other little things to keep the fans engaged, to increase revenue. I mean, you put these things together, you got Joe Burrow, you got Jamar Chase. I mean, there's not, if you were a kid who grew up in Cincinnati in the 90s, it was easy to I have good friends from Cincinnati who did that, grew up in the 90s, who just don't have any interest in the Bengals. They just don't. Why would you? If you're a little kid, you've got 1,000 cool things to do. You can go look at bugs and, play tag. Why are you going to watch a team get thumped every week? That's not the case anymore. If you're 6 or 7 years old in Cincinnati right now, or really in anywhere in Ohio, and that even branches out nationally. My good friend Greg Gagne at the Erie Seawolves game in Pennsylvania 2 weeks ago sent me a picture of a kid in August wearing a Joe Burrow jersey at a baseball game. The Bengals are doing the right things, not just to win, but the things that we see other successful franchises do in sports. They're figuring it out, and there were times, and you can go back in this podcast and listen, after Joe Burrow got hurt, I was on the verge of saying, if you can't win with this guy, what are we doing as people who root for this team? What are we doing here at this point? I don't know what it was. Give all the credit to the front office. I know Elizabeth Blackburn is kind of the face of that new role. That's awesome. We love it. Whatever they're doing, it would have been easy to have the new uniforms last year and say, well, we did that. We'll do something else in 3 or 4 years. No, this team keeps progressing, keeps chipping away, keeps getting better, not just on the field, but in ways that show us this is a franchise who has kind of seen the light differently. And going forward, the Cincinnati Bengals are going to be a team that you're proud to wear their stuff out, and you are proud to, I shouldn't even say proud about the second part. You're confident that they're going to do the right things going forward. I mean, they went out and signed these offensive linemen. They're doing the right things moving forward. And suddenly, as a fan, you have that trust that whatever the issues are that come up in Cincinnati, whatever those issues, the Bengals are going to find a way to solve them. You've never felt better as a Bengals fan. And then number 5, this is something that's easy to say you love. Every Bengals fan loves this. But Ken Riley getting in the Hall of Fame, and he'll get in next year. I hope Bengals fans pack out Canton. On one hand, you look at the committee and you say, what happened here, man? How can a guy who was top 5 in interceptions when he played in an era where it wasn't uncommon to only throw the ball 19 times in a game, how does that guy not get a chance to see himself go into Canton? Why does he have to wait a few years until after he died and fans kind of brought to your attention, how remarkable he was? That part's frustrating, but again, let's keep it positive. Better late than never. It's the Bengals now have, I'm 33. My entire life, they've had one representative in the Hall of Fame, Anthony Munoz. And that's a fantastic representative to have. The all-time greatest offensive lineman. But they got another guy in. And this kind of goes back to point number 4. The Bengals doing the right thing, putting him in the Ring of Honor and making sure that the proper amount of attention was brought. These two certainly kind of tie in. But it's incredible to see the hard work that Bengals fans and the franchise have put in to get him there. And to have another guy who wore black and orange be in Canton. And it's awesome. I hope to get to that next year. And again, franchise is trending in the right direction. Willie Anderson, Ken Anderson. Willie Anderson to me is the guy who is another no-brainer. So we'll see what happens there. But right now, stop and smell the roses. Stop and enjoy the fact that the Bengals got one in there and another one in there, I should say, and one who, while it's overdue, better late than never. And he was certainly that guy who you looked at, not just Bengals fans. I mean, this is nationally, this has been written about and talked about for years now. How's this guy not in Canton? Well, we can't write or talk about that anymore. So congratulations to the Riley family. That's just an incredible thing. And again, it's all part of the positive, the good vibes, as the kids would say, that are going on with the Cincinnati Bengals. So how much time have I done here? About half an hour? Right over half an hour. Cool. Thanks so much. I know you hear about podcasts, so if you listen, you know that when you take long breaks, you're probably going to lose some listeners. I do this for fun. I do it as a part-time therapy, and if you do it with me, thanks. I don't know. What am I getting emotional here? This is what happens when you, I don't know. I'm not getting emotional. I'm good. We're in good shape. Everything is fine. So what's next? I plan to have an episode 1 week from today. And again, that will preview the Bengals Steelers. And it will also, as I do every year, I'll give my prediction for all 32 NFL teams, as well as how the playoffs will shake out, and we'll go from there. So I hope you can join me for that one. I'm on Twitter at Matt Edwards. I'm having a lot of fun on there. Football season is why Twitter was invented. Twitter made an edit button today, too. Not a fan. Anyways, I appreciate you tuning in. If you have anything to say, chime in, whatever. If it's cool, I'll read it on the podcast. I hope to see you soon. Next Thursday, September 8th, football is back. The NFL is back, and I'll be here with you all season long. It is In the Jungle. Thanks for listening. We will see you next week.